Welcome to Vedic Wisdom for Modern Life. And today we're focusing our deep dive on a really vital topic, how the Vedas help you overcome anger.
It's such an important conversation to have, really.
Yeah, it truly is because, well, when we usually picture a house fire, the image that comes to mind is, it's obvious, it's loud, and frankly, it's terrifying.
Right. You picture those blazing orange flames.
Exactly. Thick black smoke billowing out of the windows,
Yeah.
sirens wailing in the distance. I mean, it's an undeniable emergency, and it's just completely impossible to ignore.
Yeah, it demands your immediate intervention, right?
Right.
Because the destruction is just, well, it's right there on the surface for everyone to see.
But, if you actually talk to firefighters or structural engineers, they will tell you that the most dangerous fires aren't always the ones roaring in the center of the living room.
So that's such a good point.
Right. Sometimes a fire starts deep inside the walls. It's just a rogue spark that finds some dry insulation and it smolders.
It burns quietly in the dark.
Exactly. Silently eating away at the wooden studs, just weakening the entire structure of the house long before you ever smell the smoke or see a single lick of flame.
And by that point, the structural integrity is entirely compromised, even though everything looks perfectly fine from the outside.
Yeah, and we're starting with that specific image today because that hidden smoldering fire is a remarkably accurate representation of how anger operates in our daily lives. I mean, anger is just incredibly sneaky.
It really is. We're so conditioned to think of anger as this explosive shouting match or, some dramatic theatrical throwing of hands.
Right? The big cinematic explosion.
Exactly. But so often it enters the mind very quietly. It's that slight prickly irritation when someone cuts you off in traffic.
Oh, yeah. Or the tight impatience when a crucial email doesn't arrive on your preferred timetable.
Yes, or wounded pride, or just this subtle inner hardening in your chest when a situation simply defies your expectations.
And the thing is, even if you say absolutely nothing outwardly, like even if your face remains perfectly neutral and pleasant, something within your nervous system has already begun to burn.
You can feel it. The peace that you rely on to navigate your day is just being quietly consumed.
So the mission of our conversation today isn't to make anyone feel guilty for getting mad. I mean, we're all human.
Right. Getting mad is part of the human experience.
Totally. And the Vedic tradition doesn't ask you to fear your anger. It certainly doesn't advocate for suppressing it or, swallowing it until you become some lifeless, emotionless robot.
No, not at all. The goal in Vedic wisdom is to understand the mechanics of anger deeply, to purify it, and ultimately achieve a level of mastery over it.
Which is so crucial for modern life. We're exploring this so you can protect your inner peace, safeguard the relationships that matter to you, and really just stay anchored on the journey toward your true self.
But to do that, it requires a profound shift in how we diagnose the problem.
How so?
Well, the Vedic sages understood that when we look at our anger, our gaze is almost always pointed in the wrong direction.
We focus entirely on the external trigger, right?
Exactly. We obsess over the rude comment a coworker made, or the delayed flight, or the promise someone broke. We just dissect the trigger, overanalyzing why the other person was wrong.
Right, playing the lawyer in our own heads.
Yes, but Vedic wisdom teaches that anger is rarely just about that isolated present moment.
It's just the spark. I mean, the spark wouldn't do any damage if the walls weren't already packed with dry insulation.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The insulation is the hidden root cause. That internal dryness is often built up from long-standing physical fatigue, chronically blocked desires, or a deeply challenged ego.
So it's not really about the coworker at all.
Not at the core, no. The core Vedic insight here is that anger always carries a hidden demand. It functions as a psychological protest against reality itself.
Wait, a protest against reality.
Yeah. It is the ego insisting, practically demanding, that the world, the weather, other people, that they all must obey your specific expectations and your personal timetables.
Wow. A protest against reality. That phrasing hits incredibly hard because, when you're in the middle of being mad, you feel completely justified.
Oh, absolutely. You feel entirely
You think
informed.
they shouldn't have done that, or this shouldn't be happening to me right now. But underneath all those sophisticated arguments we make in our heads, the ego is essentially just throwing a tantrum.
A huge tantrum.
Yeah, just upset that the universe didn't consult it before making a move.
That's exactly it. And when reality refuses to comply with that hidden demand, the mind becomes deeply disturbed. The friction of that resistance generates heat.
The smoldering fire.
Right. But here is where the sages make a vital, really liberating distinction. That disturbance, that heat, is not your true nature.
This is a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. The eternal self, the deepest observing part of who you are, is pure, it's aware, and it's completely untouched by the chaos of the shifting world. Anger belongs exclusively to the clouded, agitated mind.
So it's not who I am, it's just what I'm experiencing.
Precisely. It is a temporary weather pattern passing through the mind, not the eternal reality of the self.
You know, I often think about this like a car's dashboard. Anger is essentially the check engine light for the ego.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it pops up on the dashboard to tell you something under the hood is misaligned. It's just the signal. But here's the issue I think so many of us run into.
What's that?
When we are in the heat of the moment and the blood is pounding in our ears, it feels like we are the anger. It just consumes our entire identity. How does the Vedic tradition suggest we actually make that mechanical shift? Like from being totally consumed by the fire to stepping back and merely observing the check engine light.
Well, the shift relies on really understanding the mechanics of attachment. The scripture suggests that anger never magically appears in a vacuum. It is the direct offspring of frustrated desire or wounded pride.
So the attachment comes first.
Always. The more attached you are to a specific outcome, whether that's an attachment to being praised, being perfectly understood, being proven right, or simply remaining in control of a situation, the more fuel you are pouring into your internal reservoir.
Oh, I see. The attachment itself is the fuel.
Exactly.
So if I have zero attachment to being right, a critical comment literally has nothing to burn. But if my identity relies on everyone thinking I'm smart, that same comment sets the whole house on fire.
That's spot on. The realization that your true self doesn't actually need to be defended changes everything.
Because it can't be harmed anyway.
Right. The eternal self cannot be scratched by a rude comment or diminished by a delayed schedule. When you internalize that, you begin to separate your conscious identity from the ego's endless demands.
You create some distance.
Yes. You move from the state of identity, where you declare, I am angry, to the state of observation, where you simply notice, oh, there is anger arising in my mind right now because my preference wasn't met.
Which is such a different feeling.
Completely different. That cognitive distance is the beginning of genuine freedom.
It really takes the wind out of the sails. It stops the ego from feeling like it's fighting for its literal life. But, you know, bringing this into our modern context, there is this pervasive illusion we really have to address.
The illusion about strength, right?
Yeah, exactly. How we view strength. Because in worldly, corporate, or even just social life, we frequently equate anger with power.
It is perhaps one of the most dangerous misunderstandings we carry. I mean, we see someone dominating a boardroom, speaking sharply, putting someone in their place, or just intimidating others.
And society looks at that display and labels it as powerful or commanding.
Yes, but we mistake the intense heat of their reaction for actual structural strength.
Right, because honestly, anyone can react. Letting the pressure valve blow off and yelling at someone is the easiest, most primitive thing in the world.
It requires no discipline whatsoever.
Exactly. But not everyone can remain anchored when the pressure builds.
And that's what Vedic wisdom asks us to look at. To look beneath the surface display of dominance. Is a person truly strong, or are they simply unable to govern their own mind?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
Right. Is that forceful behavior guided by a clear vision of truth? Or is it just a wounded ego lashing out blindly to protect its fragile image?
So true strength isn't about the volume of your voice.
Not at all. True strength is not measured by the heat you can produce. It is measured by how much truth and clarity you can preserve when the heat inevitably arises within you. It's the difference between blindly reacting to secure a momentary victory for your ego versus engaging in what the tradition calls dharmic action.
Okay, wait, I have to jump in here, because this is where the philosophy meets the pavement for a lot of people.
Sure, let's get into it.
What if someone has done something objectively wrong? Let's say a deep injustice has occurred, someone has stolen from you, boundaries have been severely crossed, or real, tangible harm has been done to someone you love.
Right. Real-world problems.
Yeah. Does the Vedic tradition expect me to just, sit under a tree, smile passively, and let people walk all over me in the name of inner peace?
The answer to that is a resounding absolute no.
Okay, good. That's a relief.
Yeah. The Vedic path never advocates for passivity in the face of adharma. And adharma roughly translates to wrongdoing, injustice, or the breakdown of order.
So you're not supposed to just be a doormat?
You are absolutely not expected to be a doormat. But the tradition makes a crucial psychological distinction. You can say a firm no without carrying violence in your heart.
Without the internal poison.
Exactly. You can set impenetrable boundaries and you can work tirelessly to correct wrongs, but you can execute those actions without contempt or hatred.
So the outward action might look exactly the same, like you still fire the toxic employee, you still stand up to the bully, you still file the lawsuit, but the internal engine driving the action is completely different.
That's exactly it. Because when your mind is burning with rage, your discriminative intellect becomes a captive servant to that emotional reaction.
You get tunnel vision.
You literally cannot see the situation clearly, which means your actions will likely create more chaos. Dharma, on the other hand, wants to restore order and align with what is fundamentally right.
Whereas anger just wants to inflict pain and punish.
Right. To fight injustice effectively, you must first regain your inner steadiness. Once that clarity returns, you act firmly and decisively. You're applying surgical force rather than blunt, reckless destruction.
Which makes sense. Acting from a place of unshakable steadiness makes you infinitely more effective.
Infinitely.
But practically speaking, getting to that steady state requires us to catch the anger before the house burns down, right? We need a circuit breaker. And this brings us to the concept of the sacred pause.
The sacred pause is everything.
Yeah, because as sneaky as anger is, it almost always sends out physical warning signals before the mind is completely hijacked.
Oh, definitely. The body knows the fire has started way before the conscious mind registers it. The physical precursors to anger are very consistent across the board.
What should we be looking out for?
Well, your jaw tightens. Your breathing suddenly shifts from the belly up to the chest, becoming shallow and forceful.
Right, the fight or flight response.
Yeah. Your shoulders creep up, your chest hardens, and your mind starts rapidly forming these sharp defensive arguments, literally rehearsing the impending fight in your head.
We've all done that. You're standing in the shower having a full-blown adrenaline-pumping argument with someone who isn't even in the room.
Winning a debate that hasn't even happened yet.
Exactly. Just getting yourself completely worked up over an imaginary confrontation.
But if you can train your awareness to catch those early physical signals, you discover a precious doorway to transformation. You find the space between the stimulus and your response.
And if we miss that space, if we don't catch the pause, we usually tell ourselves a very convenient lie.
Which is?
We say, I don't know what happened, I just snapped, the anger suddenly took over. But looking at the actual mechanics of the mind, it seems more like we give the anger quiet permission to grow.
Oh, we grant it unnoticed permission constantly. Anger rarely arrives in its full explosive form instantly.
We let it build.
Right, we let our minds replay the offense on a loop. Our ego adds a running, dramatic commentary to the event.
I can't believe they said that. How dare they?
Exactly. We drag in memories of old hurts from 5 years ago to justify our current feeling. And our imagination supplies catastrophic conclusions. We are actively fanning the flames with our attention.
So if we miss that early warning, the internal pressure just builds to a boiling point, and eventually that pressure has to go somewhere. The easiest, most destructive release valve is almost always our speech.
Yes, and the psychological and relational damage of angry speech is immense. Anger uses speech as its primary weapon.
It's so easy to just lash out.
It is. The wounded mind feels a twisted, very temporary surge of satisfaction in striking outward, delivering a perfectly crafted insult. But words thrown in an emotional storm leave marks that last for years.
Sometimes decades.
Truly. When the fire finally settles, and it always does eventually settle, all that is left is the ashes of regret and broken trust.
Which explains why the concept of silence in the Vedic tradition isn't viewed as just, biting your tongue until it bleeds. It's framed as tapas, right?
Right.
A sacred heat-generating discipline.
Yes, tapas.
Yeah.
And it is not the silence of cold, passive-aggressive punishment.
Like giving someone the silent treatment to hurt them.
Right, that's still violence.
Yeah.
True tapas is the silence of wise restraint. When you choose silence in the face of provocation, you are actually enduring the friction of your own unexpressed ego.
That sounds really difficult.
It is, but that friction generates a purifying spiritual heat, which is tapas, rather than the destructive heat of anger. The scriptures suggest that speech should ideally be truthful, beneficial, and governed by deep awareness.
And if we're furious, we usually can't meet those criteria.
Exactly. If your mind is in a state where your words cannot meet those standards, silence is the only dharmic choice. It is infinitely better to speak tomorrow with clarity than to strike today with heat and spend years repenting in sorrow.
Speaking tomorrow with clarity is such a powerful rule of engagement. But I have to be honest, constantly trying to catch that sacred pause, constantly managing the friction of the moment. It takes a massive amount of cognitive and spiritual energy.
It's exhausting if that's all you're doing.
Right. If we only focus on intervening during those acute flare-ups, we're missing half the picture. What if I'm just fundamentally burnt out? Like if I've only slept 4 hours, I'm already halfway to a meltdown before I even pull my coffee.
Well, that's exactly it. Intervening in the moment is just treating the symptom.
Yeah.
True mastery over anger requires tending to your baseline state. You have to purify the soil of your daily life.
So it's a holistic approach.
Completely. An exhausted, overstimulated, or spiritually neglected mind is essentially a dry forest. The physical body and the mind are deeply, mechanically intertwined.
Which we forget so easily in modern life.
We do.
Yeah.
But the Vedic tradition honors the profound link between your sleep, your daily rhythms, your diet, and your mental irritability.
Because exhaustion is literally the dry kindling we talked about earlier.
Precisely. The way it works mechanically is that physical exhaustion and sensory overload degrade what the tradition calls the buddhi.
The booty.
Yes, the discriminative intellect. When your intellect is weakened by lack of sleep or a chaotic lifestyle, it simply cannot regulate the mind.
It's offline.
Right. The mind just defaults to its most primitive protective instincts, making you highly vulnerable to every minor annoyance.
So getting a good night's sleep is actually a form of spiritual armor.
It absolutely is.
That's amazing. What are the other foundational practices to cool that internal environment?
Well, beyond the physical foundations, there are specific spiritual technologies designed to cool the inner heat. Daily prayer and mantra repetition are highly effective.
How does a mantra help with anger?
Mantras aren't just symbolic rituals. Mechanically, the rhythmic repetition disrupts the chaotic, looping thoughts of the ego. It carves a new, cooling groove in the mind, gently reminding the consciousness that the ego is not the center of the universe.
Oh, I love that. It interrupts the broadcasting signal of our own self-importance.
Exactly.
I also want to touch on how our environment shapes this, because if I spend my week surrounded by people who constantly complain, gossip, or belittle others, I inevitably find myself adopting that exact same cynical posture.
Oh, that brings in the vital concept of satsanga.
Satsanga.
Yes, which translates roughly to keeping the company of truth.
In Vedic philosophy, consciousness is contagious.
Contagious, wow.
We have a deep tendency to absorb the subtle frequencies and mental postures of the people around us. If you immerse yourself in environments that glorify aggression and outrage, your mind naturally calibrates to that heat. And vice versa, I imagine.
Precisely. If you seek the company of those who value restraint, patience, and inner peace, your consciousness naturally elevates and cools to match theirs.
We are constantly absorbing the weather of our environment. And, to clean up whatever we've absorbed throughout the day, there's this practice of evening reflection that I find incredibly practical. It's essentially reviewing the tape of the day.
Quietly reviewing your day is a cornerstone practice. But you have to be careful you do not do this to beat yourself up or fall into a spiral of self-condemnation.
Right, it's not a guilt trip.
Exactly. You simply observe with objective detachment. You ask yourself, where did I feel the heat of anger arise today? What hidden demand was I trying to enforce upon reality? Did my words stem from truth, or did they stem from a wounded ego?
It's systematically bringing awareness to those hidden demands so they can't operate in the dark anymore?
Yes. And through that gentle daily awareness, you eventually arrive at perhaps the most psychologically powerful practice of all, which is forgiveness.
Which I feel is often misunderstood.
Very much so. In the Vedic framework, forgiveness is entirely misunderstood in the West. It is not a weak pardon of someone else's wrongdoing.
Then what is it?
It is a matter of internal metabolic efficiency.
Metabolic efficiency. That's a unique way to phrase it.
Well, holding on to a grudge requires immense mental energy. Forgiveness is simply your refusal to carry poison in your own heart. The longer you preserve resentment, the more dry kindling you carry. Forgiveness is how you stop feeding your own internal fire.
It's not about letting them off the hook. It's about taking yourself off the hook.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. So when you finally stop carrying that poison, what happens to all that trapped energy? When we tend to the forest, when we catch the pause, what does the transformation actually look like?
The transformation alters your entire experience of the world. When anger loses its grip, you suddenly realize how much of your life force was being wasted on just burning up inside.
All that energy just goes back into the system.
Yes. All of that reclaimed energy becomes available for patience, for courage, and for sharp, decisive action. You become far less reactive to the chaos around you, but infinitely more discerning.
The space between you and the world widens. You stop being a victim to every minor slight.
You develop a deep spiritual spaciousness. And in that vast space, a profound shift happens in how you perceive other people.
How so?
You begin to clearly recognize that the hard words, the cruel actions, and the frustrating behaviors of others almost always stem from their own immense ignorance and internal suffering.
You see the pain behind the behavior.
Exactly. When you can see their suffering rather than just colliding with their ego, genuine compassion arises naturally. Your consciousness becomes larger than the tiny fortress of me.
You move from defending the fragile ego to simply witnessing and preserving truth. That shift changes the entire trajectory of a human life.
It is the ultimate victory.
This has been such a deeply clarifying journey. I mean, truly. I want to leave you with a thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think back to that smoldering fire in the walls, the quiet, easily bruised ego that dictates so much of how we react to the people around us. If your true self is, in fact, completely untouched by the world's chaos, what would your life look like tomorrow if you made just one difficult decision from that place of untouched stillness rather than from the fragile, wounded ego?